So welcome to the RecWired podcast. On today's episode, we've got Jay Roberts from Bullhorn and Elma Lee from Bullhorn. So welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks
Andy.
for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So Bullhorn, the world's largest recruitment ATS CRM, lots and lots going on, but we're here specifically to talk about how your customers and indeed how your potential customers and just recruiters in general can develop more business. So yeah, hopefully people can get some hints, tips, and we can find out a little bit more. But I'd like to find out a little bit more about you guys as well. So Jay, first and foremost, it's lovely to have a rugby legend on my podcast. Haven't had that in a since at least last week. So but do tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, appreciate it, Andy. I'm nothing compared to Matt Dawson, who obviously you're meeting in a few weeks, but it's a pleasure to obviously be on here. Yeah, Jay Roberts. I would say over the past decade, my experience really has been in the rec SaaS space. So 11, 12 years ago, I actually started with Cloud Call as back in the day a telemarketer, and then worked all my way up to kind of quite a senior role there. After 5 or so years, I moved on to Cube 19 with Joe, Dan McGuire, and then a couple of years and onto Bullhorn, which I'm coming up to 5.5 years now. So yeah, really nearly my whole professional career has been in the recruitment SaaS space. Outside of recruitment, I love rugby as well. So we'll probably share some examples of that today.
Exactly. I mean, it's very topical with the World Cup going on. So it's a pretty tried and trusted pathway, isn't it? Those, in that ecosystem, and it's always amazed me just how people sort of cycle around. Those companies very much associated with Bullhorn. Did you always think you'd end up there?
I actually mapped out my career with my sales director at Cloud Call at the time, and my logic behind it was, I'm selling to Bullhorn customers, and there's a reason for it. And Bullhorn isn't just that one-off product, as you know, right? It's that platform with many different avenues to it. And I wanted that challenge, both personally to become a better sales professional by talking about platforms, as well as professionally as well, having Bullhorn on the CV. If I ever move on from here one day, looks quite good as well. And I'm still here nearly 6 years later. But...
And how about yourself, Elma? Different journey?
Yeah, definitely not a rugby legend. I'm Irish though, very disappointed with the Irish result. But yeah, my background's a little bit different. So my background is recruitment agency. So I worked for Robert Half for coming up to almost 7 years on their temporary and contract desk. So starting out on kind of junior accounting and finance roles, placing kind of, 7, 8, 9, 10, £10 an hour kind of clerks, and then moving up into their kind of more senior interim finance and accounting roles. So yeah, 2.5 years ago, decided to make the move over into Bullhorn, and yeah, haven't looked back since.
So as a recruiter, how do you sort of make that move? So you're there on a desk, how does that thought process, where does that conversation start that I'm going to go and work in software sales?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think I really enjoyed working at Robert Half, and I really enjoyed the recruitment world, and it wasn't the case that I was like in a place where I was like super unhappy. But I think it's always finding that it's difficult to progress in recruitment sometimes if you don't want to go down that management level, and then you're kind of also stuck on a billing desk for a long time, and kind of starting to see where that career path is for you when you don't want to maybe go with the options that are presented to you. Starts to get you thinking about what else you could do, and the SaaS world has always been something that's been attractive to me. I was being honest, I was a little bit sick of my product being a human, and I wanted to learn a bit more about something else. And I think looking into the SaaS world, I actually, similar to Jay, kind of looked at Bullhorn and thought, actually, this makes a lot of sense. I know recruitment, and they do recruitment tech, and I think the experience that I have coming from agency and understanding our clients and what they do and the intricacies of the day-to-day of being a recruiter, and in reality how they work with systems was going to be beneficial. So yeah, I actually approached Bullhorn kind of directly and started some conversations, and that's how I ended up over here.
Fantastic. So what have been the biggest differences from you going from an agency into software sales? What's your big learns?
There's a lot of similarities. The pace is definitely different. The pace is definitely different, and I think, you know, when you're selling software, there are so many more things to consider, and the sales cycles are a lot longer. People are in kind of longer term contracts, so in terms of kind of the way that you kind of map out your business development and you map out kind of winning new clients, a lot of it is about timing, but also you need a lot more information. You know, when you're doing recruitment, you've got the job spec, you know who the hiring manager is, and you kind of know what they need. Whereas when you're selling into agencies and selling software and recruitment software, as you know, we've got lots of different platforms, we've got lots of partners, there's questions around integration, so there's a lot more to consider. I think it's just different. I would say the pace is probably the main difference. It's a bit more, I would say, strategic and consultative, and you need to know a lot more about that specific business and their needs.
Jay,
not that you don't recruiting. I think in recruiting you're more specific on a role, if that makes sense. Obviously you need to know the culture, but it's more about that hiring manager and that role rather than the whole business objectives, if that makes sense.
And I guess it's, you know, genuinely when you're hiring for a hiring manager, they're the decision maker. It's not all the, yeah, appreciate it's not always the case, but there's not always hundreds of decision makers potentially now, you know, stakeholders and advocates that you've got to be working on. Jay, you didn't come from a recruitment background, so, you know, from someone who doesn't come from a recruitment background, what's your sort of take on what recruiters should do differently to be more successful?
There's my take and there's evidence. So I'll answer that question probably in two different veins. I think if you look at the evidence side, 10 years ago, recruiters were okay, I think, just with picking up the phone, building relationships, kind of doing their thing from start to finish. I think 10 years later, now businesses expect a lot more of recruiters and they need help with those expectations. So I think really for the recruiters that are looking to beat their competition, the ones that are beating them are the ones that are doing things differently. A great example is things like social media, personal branding. There's so much of that in the recruitment space right now. So when you do add that human touch on top of personal branding, on top of the technology you're using, or on top of just the wider things that you're doing, like using data, other things in life, I think that's where the real competition and eliminating the competition becomes number one for that consultant. I think from experience, the businesses that are using things like tech, thinking differently, thinking about personal branding, thinking about actually it's not just a phone call to win new business, it's about that relationship, that human element. I think consultants thinking about that, it's evident that they're beating their competition and more of it is happening.
I'm a bit of a dinosaur. I did this a long time ago, so I started my career in 1999, and you're right, it actually just seemed a lot simpler. There was, you know, you had pretty much 2 outreach tools, 3 if you included, you know, gradually the internet was coming in, job boards, and gradually you had more and more sort of web exposure generally, but it was typically the phone or email that you were able to use. But now with so many channels, you know, the job of a 360 consultant is just so complicated.
I agree, yeah. And I think if you think about your personal life as well, whenever you want to do something in your personal life, you used to have to physically go and do it. Newspaper at the local shop, right? Blockbuster is a great example. You wanted to go watch a film, you've got to walk a mile or drive a mile to go and rent out a film, forget it, pay the late fees and return it a day later. If you look at now, I bank with NatWest. I don't even have a NatWest in my local town. But yeah, I can access my mortgage and I can access my bank, my savings, my kids' savings, all from a click of a button. So I think businesses or people that are keeping up with the times, both personally and professionally, are winning. But there's some of the people that respectfully aren't keeping up with the times will be beaten by their competition at some point, whether that's now or in the next year, 2 or 3 years, because they're used to that comfort zone of, I just need to pick up the phone and do these things. when actually those things have evolved and changed over time.
Yeah, and I found they've changed really quickly. I know, Jay, you kind of mentioned 10 years ago, but 2.5, 3 years ago, I was working in recruitment, and we didn't have access to, we had a lot of tech, but we didn't have access to, a lot of things that we have access to now, like the automation tools that we have, AI, that, AI is a huge conversation. And, there's so many businesses that haven't even touched automation yet, never mind kind of bringing in AI strategies to their business. So that's changed really, really quickly. And it can be a bit overwhelming, like especially for a day-to-day recruiter in terms of where to spend your time. And especially, I think there's a lot more pressure on consultants now to win new business. I think coming out of COVID, and I think we've probably all heard of this, that the market was super buoyant. It was a candidate-led market. That's changed. Anyone who looks at our good reports or any kind of reports, winning new business, winning new clients is back as the number one priority. Whereas kind of in 22, that was candidate acquisition. So, a lot of the consultants working in agencies that we speak to have never worked in a volatile market and never worked in a market when it's been focused on kind of winning new business and winning new clients. So A, they don't have the experience, but B, they haven't really used, they might have access to the tools, but they haven't used the tools for the way that their business are wanting them to use them now. So I think I think Jay will talk to this probably a bit better than I do, but using the data, less of that kind of spray and pray mentality, and trying to have a bit of a strategy around that is really important, and kind of dedicating time to that.
We actually see a lot of that across the group. So I mean, we coming out of COVID, there was obviously the bounce, and there was a big skill shortage, and there still remains a skill shortage. But probably end of Q2 22, people's job flow started to go down, and I don't think it's a particularly bad market. It feels like a normal market, which is generally tough, and I think actually anyone entering the industry in the last 2.5 years might have thought it was quite an easy industry to get into, because you didn't have to necessarily win new logos, get new clients on board, and it's been tough. And I think the companies that have done well are the ones that have invested in their people, they've invested in their infrastructure. They didn't go crazy and bet the farm, in the last couple of years that it's all gonna go well, and just realized actually it is actually hard work. The fees are good, but the work is hard to get them generally.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. That the market has gone back to normal. It hasn't got worse. It's been good, obviously, for coming off the bounce of COVID, but it's gone back to normal is what we're finding. And because potentially the more experienced recruiters that are slightly older in life have maybe gone on, retired, changed industries, and you've got the new graduates, juniors coming through, I think Elma's right. They haven't learned that business development skill in order to adapt to that market. And that's probably where most businesses are now struggling, because of that, I guess, profile of consultant that businesses may have. Still a bit of a guessing game, I think.
Yeah, it's the combination of getting the data and the tech right, but also, I guess, just going back to some of the older school like mentalities as well, and picking up the phone and doing some of the back to basics that people just weren't doing, I think, during COVID, because they didn't have to. So we're hearing a lot of that, and certain sectors are being affected a bit more than others. I think for some sectors it's a tougher market out there now. Particularly tech, some of the tech world, here a little bit in life sciences at the minute as well. But we're starting, I think, as of kind of August, September, we started to see a lot of our clients in that space pick up there. So hopefully that's a good sign of where things are to come.
One of the things that does, as an advisor and going into businesses, always strike me is that people don't use a lot of the assets they have, though. People talk about data being their biggest asset, but often judge them by their actions, they're not always following through on that. And one of the things I've sort of found is that a lot of people can go back and their existing customer base and the classic customer base, are you hunting around them? Are you using your information around that? Is everything going onto the system of record, or is it being held in consultant spreadsheets, those type of things? And I think LinkedIn is really polarize this for me. I mean, people spending thousands on LinkedIn licenses, and where actually if they invested maybe as much in their job boards, their ATSs, their systems of records, they'd probably get a lot more out of it.
I think it's funny. It's a conversation we're having every day with our clients. LinkedIn obviously are that monopoly, and I think it's difficult for a lot of agencies to operate without that. So I think there's absolutely, for new candidate acquisition, there's a place for LinkedIn, but the amount of people that we speak to and do analysis on, and how many times they're spending money on email credits or spending money on LinkedIn when that candidate already exists in their database, or when they already have a relationship somewhere with their business with that candidate or that hiring manager. So it's absolutely something that we're working quite a bit on, and Jay, I'm sure, can speak to this as well in a second, but less reliance on job boards and LinkedIn for the candidates in your database, utilizing automation, utilizing tools to outreach to those candidates, and having a database first mentality. It's easier said than done, but the clients that we have that are doing that are winning and being super successful with it. But again, you really need to have a strategy in place. And I think that the stats that we have are most agencies probably touch 5 to 15% of their database, in terms of, if you're not using automation and AI and other tools, and to help with that outreach and to help with that business development, you're not going to reach the number of people that you need to reach to. So I guess, it's finding the balance with that.
To go back to Jay's point, actually, around the banks, there's a really nice parallel or segue into that the banks, actually, when they did that, you say there's no branches. If the banks closed all the branches that they closed 10 years ago, there'd be blood on the streets. People would think that the whole system was collapsing and these guys, but what they actually did was just make it easier. So they didn't take it away to start with, they just made it easier. So it was a lot easier to do it from your phone than it was to actually go into a branch, and that suited people. It's a lot easier to stream a film on Netflix than it is to go into Blockbuster. And I always say to companies, don't tell people to use the database and the system, just make it easy for them. Because if that's the easiest way for them to do their role, and you put that in and you make it easy, and actually that's how you measure, that's how you reward, that's how you manage people. Generally, it's a lot easier to get that advocacy.
I think that's a really good point. We're talking about consultant experience right now. But something I also ask business leaders consider is the candidate and client experience. If I go onto their website tomorrow and I register for a job, how long is that process going to take me? What happens to my data? Is it lost in the void? What happens? Do I get a good experience? Do I get a reach out text, a reach out email, a reach out phone call to know that I'm a valued candidate and you value me looking for a new opportunity? So again, it comes back to experience. And I'll use Amazon on this example here, because if I'm searching for a present for my anniversary, I'm going to go onto Amazon. I'll click buy now, and I'm constantly updated different ways. Number one, data. Hey, your parcel's at this depot. It's going to be with you tomorrow. Okay, cool. You then get to that day. Hey, your parcel's 8 stops away. This is your driver. This is when they're delivering it. That's a great experience for me, because if I might be out at a meeting or whatever, they'll ring the doorbell technology, and I'll say, hey, can you just leave it in the drive, please? So tech is advancing at a rate of knots, as Elma said earlier, but it's also advancing because of the experience that we as end consumers demand. Right from 10 years ago, we demanded that phone call, that personal touch. Now we demand that we should be able to self-service whatever we want in life, whether that's looking at the rugby scores on BBC Sport, 2 clicks to do that, whether that's ordering that anniversary present off Amazon. We also demand, we want to know what's happening with that thing there and then as well. So I think the central point around this is data. Data is feeding us every step of the way in our personal and professional lives. And so when you are thinking about that experience, my advice to any business leader out there is almost put it into buckets. Bucket number one, consultant experience. If they have a great experience with tech or your brand, the efficiency will drive higher. Same with your clients, same with your candidates as well. and that can be increased, decreased via different methods. You know, tech is an obvious one, but actually things like enablement, things like sharing your vision, your goals, what you're trying to do, your core values, mission values as a business, and how you're all in it together as well to drive those different experiences.
Yeah, one of the things I always do when I go into a new advisory is I always ask them how many jobs they've got on, and then I look at how many they've actually got of those have been advertised on their own website. So, you know, and again, it's around challenging that data as well, but maybe that's because it's really difficult to post to your own website, and LinkedIn have made it super easy to post to, you know, to post to those job slots. So those are the type of things that people really do need to look at. Elma, for anyone knowing what you know now, so anyone sat at a desk recruiting right now, what things would you change? What would you do differently now, going in and sitting at a desk at Robert Half 6.5 years ago, or 8.5 years ago now?
Yeah, I hope no one from Robert Half is listening. And no, I think knowing what I know now and understanding how important it is to use the tech in the way it's supposed to be used, you know, parsing in your candidates, tagging your skills, doing the kind of basics, not having them just sit in your inbox, and creating kind of talent pools within your database so that you can then use that data, have the right kind of analytics, have the right dashboards. You know, it's not something that I definitely did not do that well enough. You know, I started off using kind of on the DAP. We used to print out every CV in the office, and every candidate came in and registered with us. We'd print the CV, we'd go in, we'd register them, write everything on paper, and it would go into a folder next to my desk. Like, that was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So I think getting everything into the database firstly, and having a database first mentality, and having them coded, skilled, with the right kind of geotags and all of that. It sounds basic, but the same for the client. So then you can use that data to find kind of as we're saying, you know, track your KPIs and that, but so that your searching is more accurate, so that we would be able to kind of layer things like automation in that. Because at the minute, or even then, it's about trusting the data, isn't it? Going back to what we spoke to earlier. If you don't trust the data that's in your database, you are going to go to LinkedIn, you are going to go to your job boards, client or candidate data, that is. And I would have been a lot more diligent with getting that right up front to make me more successful when it really mattered. So when we needed to find that really quick candidate, you know, to get into a temp job this afternoon or tomorrow morning, you know, it was up to date, it was ready. Whereas we were definitely at times slow to the mark because that wasn't the case, and going to the job board rather than the database. So that's kind of one. I think as well, talking about data and I guess more so on the business development side, we maybe having put a bit more time and effort into client reporting and understanding kind of how successful we were with some clients versus other clients, and doing a bit more analysis on that, and not just kind of, you know, trying to work everything. I think there's a lot of importance in walking away from jobs that you're working that you are probably not going to fill because you're trying to hit a KPI, or you're trying to hope for the best. You know, they're not giving you what you need, they're not giving you exclusivity, you know, they're not meeting your best candidate, for example, and you know, may probably have been a little bit more ruthless in being able to kind of say, okay, thanks but no thanks, but we're going to focus on this. We had so many different brands, clients, temp, contract, perm desks. Like, we didn't do enough kind of cross-sell or analysis and saying, okay, this is how long it takes us to fill a job with this client, and yes, they give us loads of jobs, but our success rate is this, versus client down here who doesn't give us a lot of jobs, but the 3 that we have, we've been really successful with, and being able to kind of use some of that data to focus your time on the right clients and the right candidates. So I think I answered that in a little bit of a long-winded way, but hopefully there's a few little nuggets in there that help.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's one of the things I noticed when I started working, you know, on trying to support the sales of the software products we're building at S3, and also working with vendors as well. What's really noticeable, recruiters will typically have a bash at anything and work at on a gut as opposed to on what's going to make them the most, you know, or the longer term, or what's the best prospect. You know, we used to, you know, at S3 years and years ago, I'm sure they still do, grade jobs. So, you know, A, B, C, D. A job's an exclusive, and if you had a job on exclusive, you generally, you know, place it greater than 50% of the time. So I beg the question, why would anyone work on anything else? So, and you know, some of the best recruiters I ever worked with, I would say, valued their time. You know, they were a certain amount of time in the office, they had a certain amount to deal, and they actually, rather than work stuff that wasn't great, they'd spend their time finding stuff that was. So, you know, it's almost that sort of stick or twist. They'd rather than play a really, you know, that play, right, we're going to go for this. And so, yeah, but I get that, I feel that in software sales, that people really, you know, value their opportunities a lot better. Is that fair, Jay? You sort of see that pipelines are managed a bit better?
I think so. I think it's the same and different at the same time, depending on size of business and level or complexity of business as well. So again, we never like to turn anyone away because it's all an equal opportunity. But there, you know, in any walk of life, there will always be, you know, businesses that kind of are drawn to, we've always done it this way. We're always going to do it this way. And you just kind of need to accept that if you're in the software sales game. But then again, if you come back to the businesses that go, yeah, fine, you know what, we've been on some tech for 4 or 5 years, we're a little bit behind the times, and then start to challenge themselves, that's where the businesses really go on that journey to say, hey, it served a purpose, fine, not a problem. What are we doing wrong? How do we get better? So then that's where the partnership element, I think, really comes in. And that's where our time is probably spent more, is with those businesses that are open. Critique is probably too heavy a word to use, but are open to being challenged around best practices, around why they're doing certain things that way. And it often comes back to that, you know, like I said a second ago, that age-old saying of, we've always done it that way. So I think businesses that are open to being more educated, learning about best practices, learning about what other clients are doing in that similar sector or similar process or workflow, are the ones that tend to be more successful because they're open to that constructive feedback.
Yeah, to add to that, I do think you're right, Jay. It's different and it's not. But I found in recruitment a lot of the time, especially that's why winning, like especially when you're trying to win new business and you're new to a client and you're maybe, you know, they've got 4 other agencies, 3 that they've worked with before, getting that time up front to really understand the company and their needs and have that consultative approach is a lot more difficult than it is in software sales. I think when you're going to market in software sales, you're kind of ready to make that decision, whereas an agency, you're often on the back foot and you're kind of trying to intrude on their process. So it's definitely a bit different. I think if you can get that time with a client in recruitment, that is the differentiator. And you need to get out there and meet your clients. I think, like, going back to kind of like pre-COVID, you know, we at Robert Half used to have like a saying, if you hadn't met the client, it's not a job that we should be working. Sometimes they would say, should you really work that light? The client isn't going to meet you in person to give you the time to talk about this job and get you to fill it. Are you going to spend your time on it really? Of course we sometimes would. But yeah, it's so important. And I think now it's the balance of remote working, but actually getting out there and doing some more of the old school stuff. And yeah, if we met the client, our success rates were just so much higher. So in winning new business, I would probably say that's the number one thing. Get out there, meet people, do your client lunches, do your candidate meetings, and yeah, you tend to see the success rates go up.
I really agree with that.
Devil's in the... Oh, sorry, Andy.
But I really agree. I mean, we Daughter Charlotte and I started a business in COVID and never met each other. But actually, you know, when we actually do get to meet up, it's really good. And really, you know, it's probably the part of this business that I miss the most, actually, is those sort of those sort of brainstorming sessions, getting there. So I can see how that works on the client side of things as well. Sorry, Jay.
I was going to say, I often find in the software game, the devil is always in the detail, which, again, we've had this, every business will have this over the years, but we've had businesses that want to talk to us, fine, but jump straight to the demo. And I always disagree with that, because I always find the discovery process is probably the most important part of the process, because it's not just understanding if they can pass a CV or not, but it's actually understanding the why behind things. And once you get to that why, or that compelling event, or that compelling reason, it then starts to help us weirdly do our jobs better. Because once we start to understand that why or that compelling event, we can then start to really go, hey, as best practice, as an educator, as a trusted advisor, this is what I would do. This is what other clients have done that have gone through this experience with you. So I think I agree with Elma, actually. The more detail, the more effort that goes in up front, the bigger the success of the project is, because there's no gotchas, there's no red flags, concerns, problems, because it's all kind of been ironed out early before you get to the nitty-gritty of negotiation and stuff like that.
Okay, so anyone looking for a new ATS should come and have an exploration session with you, and you'll take them all through it and really scope out all their needs, yeah?
100%.
That's how we like to do it.
So last question for you guys. 2023 has been, it's felt like a long decade, 2023, but what does 2024 hold? What do we think? What's our predictions for the market?
Do you want to take this first, Alma?
I think it's looking good. I think we've started to see a turn. I think there's in the rec tech world, there's some really exciting things happening. I think like the rate that AI is it's scary what's happening with AI and the rollouts that we have coming with that. I think most of our customers are starting to see things improve. So I'm really excited for 2023. But I think that's going to be the big talking point, the rollout of AI, how that's going to help consultants win new business, how it's going to help them kind of get on with their day jobs. Excited to see the customers that are kind of testing that at the minute with us, how they start to roll that out and how we start to see the benefits of that.
Jay, yourself?
I think, well, this sounds like I'm picking on businesses, but I'm not. But there was some businesses that didn't change technology to suit the times over the past 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And I think there's going to be an influx of that next year because of the AI factor. So because they're on quite outdated technology and their competitors potentially aren't, I think there's going to be an influx of businesses going through that initial step of digital transformation and trying to catch up with some of these competitors because they are 5, 6 years behind in terms of their tech. So I think we're going to find ourselves in 2 buckets here. I think we're going to find ourselves in the first example that Elma's just shared, where businesses are already up here, but they're now taking it to the next level and the next level. And then you've got some businesses from a tech standpoint that are slightly down here and trying to get here and here and here. So I think, we're going to have a potentially massive influx with businesses trying to really get onto that digital transformation journey quicker than they probably thought that it was happening because of things like AI and automation.
Yeah, just quickly to add to that, and I guess taking it back to what I mentioned at the beginning of this, I spoke about kind of winning new clients being the number one priority we survey about 2,000 customers in our grid survey, and for 2023, the second most important priority was digital transformation, and that's ahead of candidate acquisition, client relationships, candidate experience, marketing. Digital transformation was number 2. So I think we're only going to see that grow more and more coming into 2024. And businesses are listening now. They, as Jay said, they know that if they haven't, they need to make this change. And of course, it's about timing. But yeah, so exciting times for us.
Awesome. Well, we'll have to get you on in a year's time and find out if your predictions came true. So off to the Tiara Awards tonight. Obviously, anyone hearing on this on the podcast won't. It'll be gone, and I'm sure it would have been a great event anyway. So definitely enjoy yourself there tonight, guys. And
thank you.
Thanks for taking the time. If people want to talk to you about their systems, their processes, or just general chat, how can they get hold of you guys?
For me, I love LinkedIn. I think it's the easiest way rather than trying to remember my email. So quite a plain common name, but Jay Roberts. I reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn, and more than happy. And then we can share emails and phone numbers and stuff like that. I think that's the best way. And plus, you get a sneak peek at some of the content that we share on a daily basis as well.
Yeah, of course. Same as I'm definitely not a LinkedIn superstar like Jay is. I think he's the face of LinkedIn for Bullhorn, but you can still get me there. But yeah, we'd love to chat to anybody who'd be keen to.
Fantastic. Right, guys. Thanks so much for your time. And yeah, let's hope for a big 2024 for everyone. Thanks, guys.
Sounds great. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
See you later. Thank you.